back to another Cardinals Off Day podcast. We are in the cluster of off days that is the All-Star break. We're at the end of that cluster, but it still counts as the off day, and we're dropping this the last off day of the All-Star break right before what we still call the second half, even though it's much less than a half, or a little bit less than a half anyway, starts. I am Ben Godar, one of your hosts, here as always with my good friend Ben Humphrey. Ben,
I'm
how are you
doing well. I'm still letting the idea of a swing off percolate in my brain because I don't know if I have fully wrapped my arms around this new reality we live in.
Yeah, it's kind of snuck up on us. I mean, I feel like that rule's been on the books for several years now, but I had completely forgotten about it until it was like, one out in the ninth inning or whatever, and they mentioned it, and I was like, oh yeah, that's a thing, isn't it? Ben, gut check for me, like, it was fun. So,
Yeah.
like, I think I'm okay with it.
Where are you at? I think the nadir of the C-League era and the All-Star game itself was when the game would not end. and it's also, as the exhibition has become all the more of an exhibition and the manager makes a good faith attempt to get everyone in, it just wears out all of your pitching, to such an extent that and also it when you saw all the players who are having all-star caliber first halves say, oh, nope, I don't want to go because, like I need the time off or whatever, especially pitchers, it just kind of drives home like this, they need an alternative way to end it. And what better way than having the BP pitcher throw to guys and have them try to hit home runs. And it's a great way, I think, to end a tie All-Star game. A really great way.
Yeah. No, totally. Honestly, as I was watching it, I was thinking about the Elam ending that they use in the NBA All-Star game, which I honestly really kind of wish they would consider using for real, because I do think like the end of basketball games in general, and maybe NBA games even more so, is just kind of interminable with the the fouling and the free throw shooting. But regardless, it's fun that they kind of use the NBA All-Star game as like a little bit of a laboratory to, kind of play around with that. So I kind of thought, why not here as well? I think, Ben, our reservations probably come from the fact that we know that in the last collective bargaining agreement, they kind of rejiggered the rules committee such that Rob Manfred can just do whatever he wants. So it's very likely that this weekend every game will end swing off.
You can definitely see this getting a foothold to become something more than what it is right now. It's been uniformly, it got buzz on social media, which you can only imagine everyone taking note of that, and everyone seems to have enjoyed it. Everyone hates the Manfred man, runner on second to start an inning and extra innings. And about the only people in the world who hate something more than the fans hate the bonus runner is Major League Baseball players hating playing extra innings. And this this would also remedy that. Like, I don't think the players would push back. Now, maybe in the postseason, but like not during the regular season, I don't think.
Right. And Ben, it's fun. Like, I've kind of evolved a little bit on that too. Like, I know when the Manfred man first came around, I definitely had some like, well, this isn't really baseball, and why should the baseball stop at the end of the ninth inning, and et cetera, et cetera. But I got to be honest, I'm kind of like, they play 162 of these. Like, like let's wrap this one up and get on to tomorrow. Like, how much does it really matter if game 73 of the season ended with either Manfred men or standard baseball rules or a swing off? Doesn't really matter, right? We just kind of need a winner. so everybody can go home,
And
enjoy
that
the
is
rest of
what
their
the
evening.
players want to
Um,
do. They either want to get on a plane to go home or
yeah,
get to their next destination or get away from the ballpark. And I can't say as I blame them, because if you were uh, at the end of your shift and then your boss was like, "Hey, surprise,
yeah,
overtime. How long? Who's to say?"
yep,
Like that is not fun if you are the
yep.
person doing the labor.
No,
So I don't blame them at all, and I won't be
yes,
surprised if
yes,
this starts to get uh, more of a foothold as a viable extra inning solution moving forward.
yeah. Well, not only do I not blame them just as a labor issue, I really don't think it makes any difference at all in just the kind of final standings of an MLB season. It's like you could flip a fucking coin. It'd be about the same. But, at least the swing off is still there's some baseball happening. You get everybody, chicks dig the long ball, right? We all love it. We all love the home runs. So yeah, anyway, it was fun in the All-Star game, and Ben and I will talk about how we feel about it in a few weeks when every single game ends that way. But Ben, we've already been talking about something that we learned from the All Star game, but I wonder, is there something else that you feel like
Um,
you've learned?
I have learned, and we got together with friends and watched it. And I think what I have learned is, for me, like the vibe in the stadium, and especially in this day and age with, high definition video and higher quality audio, like the discrepancy between even a regular season game that the crowd is into and the All-Star game is quite large, because it is, there's just a bunch of uh, corporations have seats that they've given to clients or employees, and there's, that lower bowl. I feel like they've largely priced, your everyday fans like you or me, and a lot of our listeners out of it. And you know, there's just it feels like very dead. The the game itself and just kind of the vibe. And what fills that void, though, is the players kind of being jokey and having fun, and that has kind of brought it back to life. Like, they aren't approaching this like sternly and like this is our job and we have to win. And I think that's the right thing to do as a product. But I'll tell you, it's just like the vibe out in whatever county they play in outside of Atlanta now, um, was not. It was just not like didn't really have a feel that the crowd was even into it. And we even made the joke when the over the loudspeakers it was like, everybody clap your hands, then like no one clapped their hands, and we were just kind of like,
Right.
oh, they don't
Yeah.
understand to do that because they don't
Right.
go to baseball games usually. And it was just kind of a, yeah, it was just
Right.
kind of,
No, if it said everybody check your crypto on Robinhood, I think that would have more accurately reflected what
yeah,
was going on.
and it was, I still enjoy it. I'm really happy that they're wearing their team uniforms again, which I think really adds to it. Um, but the dynamic in the ballpark itself, I just thought it really came through on the Fox broadcast that the people who were at the ballpark did not really appear to be very much into that game.
Yeah, no, I certainly agree with you on that, and yeah, I don't. I mean, it's the All Star Game is just such a conundrum because it's like it's an exhibition, but we want it to mean something. Everybody's just having fun, but like let's
Yeah.
see the greatest in the game compete against each other. So I just feel like there's kind of, it's just a lot of like neither fish nor fowl kind of with the All Star break. Um, Ben, I feel like I'm repeating maybe something that I talked about recently as something that I learned, but we don't keep great notes, nor do we check the notes that we do keep. So I'm going to press forward anyway. But regardless, I think I'm thinking about this because the All Star break, though it is technically slightly past the halfway mark of the season, it really is a time to kind of like reflect back on like who is this team, and maybe who is this team in relation to kind of what we expected. And um, so I think what I have learned is that the Cardinals just are the Cardinals in a way that is like in their DNA and they cannot remove themselves from. And you know this so you know, this team in a season where the idea was, oh, it's going to be runway, we're not going to add to the team, we're just going to kind of let them go. They are surprisingly competitive, and I know Cardinals fans are kind of frustrated that they're not even better than they are right now. But you know, I was just looking back, and win projections basically had them between like 77 and 82 wins was kind of where like all of the like meaningful preseason projections had them. I mean, they're currently on pace for 85. So, you know, like even above kind of the high end of what the preseason projections were. And so, like, how are they doing that? Well, that's the other thing is like, you know, this is not like a stars and scrubs kind of organization or team and never has been. But like every kind of like role player, even though it's not always sexy, they just have like a smidge of positive value. And you just add all of that smidge of positive value up, and like they're still a pretty good team, even when they're not really trying to be. So I think as fans, we honestly should feel pretty good about that because we know that it's been a rougher stretch here. We know that the player development has fallen off. We know that this team is not as good as it has been. But like, you know, I think like, you know, if this is like the bad version of the Cardinals, again, just as a reminder to us Cardinals fans, if the bad version of our team wins 85 games, like that's not too bad. So anyway, I just feel like, you know, when I look back, that's just kind of what I see because it's not like they've changed course. It's not like they decided, oh no, we're gonna, you know, do anything different. Just kind of letting the chips fall where they may. Just baseline, they seem to be about that good. So I feel like that's what I've learned from
Yeah,
it.
and I think this is what the best that, if we play the expectations game, after the last two seasons, where 2 years ago they were terrible, last year they defied the gravity of their run differential. And this year they have wins that they've earned. Like they're not, punching above their weight compared to the run differential. And I think if you'd
Yeah.
have told us that they'd be less than, two games out of the last wild card at the All-Star break, you would have been quite happy after the last
Yeah.
two seasons. But that
Yeah.
success really ups the ante where now people are like, well, okay, so what are you going to do there? Because Cardinals fans know this is a good team, but it's not a great team, and there are holes there. And so it feels like being a very high quality team is within reach, and um, but everything is still in limbo, with the transition and everything else. And so
Yeah.
I think the next few weeks in the trade deadline will be interesting.
Yeah, well, I guess the thing that's interesting to me too is that if you had told me before the season that they were going to overperform their expectations, I would have said, "Oh yeah, I believe that. I see a path towards that." But I would have guessed it was because, you know, a couple of these sort of runway
Yeah,
guys like really broke out, right? Like, "Oh, okay. It's because Nolan Gorman and Jordan Walker are superstars now, right?" And that would have been my guess as to how this Cardinals team could have potentially like overperformed, you know, and that's not what's happened at all. You know, I think Ivan Herrera is the one guy who has like really exceeded sort of his expectations, and you know, shown, oh, this is a very, you know, a very good player, you know. But aside from that, it's, you know, kind of, you know, some guys doing a little better, some guys doing a little worse. It's
yeah.
just that the sum total is just so much more than maybe we think it's going to be. So anyway, I don't want to belabor that too much, but that's definitely what I've learned. But Ben, something else that we learned, we have some new Cardinals by dint of the MLB draft. So I thought we'd just take a moment to chat about that. I know I personally have learned who all of these guys they drafted are since then, and by all of these guys, I mean like maybe like the top four. Um, but uh, you know, as we always kind of let people know, I don't think neither you or I consider ourselves like prospect experts, and certainly not the next level of prospect experts, which is like amateur experts. So um, I don't really know a lot or have a lot of expectations coming in, but I'm always fascinated to see what they do and kind of what they do in the draft and what that tells me about kind of what they're valuing. And I think this year in particular, Ben, and I'm just going to kind of kick us off here. What really stood out to me was going after pitchers with very high end strikeout stuff and specifically like very high end fastballs. And that is a dramatic departure from what they've done for quite a while now, which, we joke about the polished college arms, but it took a weird turn because, in the kind of early 2010s, we were still getting, Michael Wacha's and, I mean, Carlos Martinez was an international signing, but, the Cardinals were definitely like going after guys who had some like pretty high end stuff. And I don't know what it was over the last like, 5, 7, however many years, but like their philosophy on free agent pitchers, which is, uh, junk baller pitch to contact guys, which I think I
Yeah.
understand why they do that with free agent pitchers because the price tag is so much lower and the risk on starting pitching is enormous. But when they suddenly started doing that in the draft, I was just like, this is the one
Yeah.
place where you actually can get the high end stuff. And they weren't even going for it. They were drafting like Cooper Jerpy type guys. So that stood out to me as a significant departure here. What did you
I thought
think?
it was interesting, as you say, because like the the central tenet of DeWallet ball is you're going to use the draft and development system to get the type of player you cannot afford to sign as a free agent. And you just hit the nail on the head with that, where why do I want Jake Woodford or Gordon Graceffo or Michael McGreevy out of the draft when, like, yeah, there's a low floor, but the ceiling is not very high, and you're really looking at like a 4, maybe a 5 in the starting rotation. Like they're back end starters. Like that's because they don't have a fastball that plays.
Yeah.
Um, and of course, the other intriguing factor here is that Chaim Bloom is overseeing the player development overhaul. And so, what was the draft room right? Like he's taking over next year. Why would John Mozeliak be approving? And I haven't seen it reported with what that was like. But this definitely seems different. And this is the second year in a row, though, where you're seeing, instead of the Dr. Thunder draft pick, we have a Dr. Pepper draft pick because we're there in the top 10. And
Yeah.
it's like Weatherholt is like the
Yeah. It
the the greatest contact
yeah.
college bat imaginable for the Cardinals. Like he is, like
But Ben, this could have even been like the Jones
this
soda
is even
draft,
above that.
right? This
Yeah.
is like they're just gonna give you a bottle that you could get at the supermarket and charge you $6 for it
Yeah.
at like this
And
nice
but
cafe
so
you're
like
at.
Weatherholt is like representative of these traits that the Cardinals look for, but he's at the high end of everything. And he's a baseball rat.
Yeah.
He hits with contact. He's all of these
Mm-hmm.
things. But then you look at it and it's like, yeah, and he's also going to be in the major leagues within 2 years, because he's so good. And then you
Mm-hmm.
look at the draft this year, and you did a good job of describing what they're doing, but then when you're drafting 5 and Liam Doyle, who's the ace of aces in the SEC, is available, oh, that is also a high floor
Yeah.
college arm, who's going to ascend quickly to the majors. But he also throws in
Yeah.
the high 90s, and has a disgusting splitter, like up 2+ pitches instead of, and then it grades out as an
Yeah.
average or a slightly above average, depending on what you look at, slider. And it's like, oh yeah, he'll probably be starting in the major leagues, by the end of 2026, frankly. Depending on that, on
Yeah.
how it all plays out, but certainly by the end of 2027. And like he
Right.
represents those things, and he also has
Yeah.
kind of a funky delivery, which they were targeting, like a couple years ago. But again, he also throws in the high 90s, and people can't touch his fastball. And it's this
Yeah.
weird thing where it's like, oh, when you
Yeah.
draft this high and you look for these traits, you can get a really good player. And it's kind of fun.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and Ben, even just going beyond Doyle, who, when you're in the top five, like you really just kind of have like
Yeah.
studs to choose from, right? So I don't even know if that in and of itself is as telling as the one that jumped out to me was their third pick, Tanner Franklin, the relief pitcher from Tennessee, who throws like 102, like an easy 102, and all reports are, even though he's been a reliever his entire college career, they're going to try to make him a starter. And so, number one, that really shows me like, oh, they're like high end, like fastball, strikeout stuff. They're going after that. But it also shows me like, oh, they really feel like they actually have
Oh,
player development
there
now
were a ton of
because
player
like
development
for
picks
for
this year, weren't
for the
there?
last like yeah. Oh, yeah. Because for the last 10 years, it's just been like, we're going to draft guys to be what they are now. Like, we're going to help them get better at what they are now, but we don't believe that we have any way to kind of mold them into something. I mean, it's frankly, it's crazy to draft, third round, 72nd pick overall,
Yeah.
a relief pitcher. I mean, that's nuts, right? Just someone who's going to slot, is going to be a relief pitcher. You wouldn't do that, but they have enough faith that they can turn this person into a starting pitcher. And so, that was sort of something that just really, stood out to me there as well. And frankly, in an exciting way. And I just think it makes so much sense, so, and people have used this term like reliever risk a
Yeah.
lot, which you and I have kind of talked about is like ridiculous because all pitchers have reliever risk because like bad pitchers become relievers. Actually, bad pitchers stay in the minor leagues and then like own car dealerships or work at car dealerships. you know Good but not great pitchers become relief pitchers, and then like great pitchers become starting pitchers. So every pitcher has reliever risk asterisk, but they just seem to have really looked beyond that kind of what is the kind of template that this player is in right now to what are the tools there and what can we make out of it. And it's just especially exciting that they went after like really loud tools because yeah, like you just can't you have to pay through the nose for loud tools on the free agent market, and for a team like the Cardinals it's just not tenable or not something that they can do regularly or in a really significant way. So yeah, I mean, we know that like the majority of these guys aren't going to pan out to the way that we kind of hope they will, but the shots that they're taking here are so exciting. And there's been years where it's like the Zach Thompson type picks where it's like, okay, like I can see like the high end of where this guy lands is just still
Yeah.
not really that exciting, right? so so I really appreciated this as a template for hopefully drafts
And
and player
just
development going
another like
forward.
player development pick, the Ryan Mitchell pick, where he was a shortstop and the Cardinals announced him as an outfielder when they drafted him. And I was thinking to myself when I saw that, I was like, they didn't even have a roving outfield instructor until until this year, and now they're on a day
Right.
one pick, they're drafting a shortstop that they're moving to the outfield. And so I kind
Yeah.
of got a chuckle out of that as well. And they've got some other guys who have some injury issues or have good stuff but haven't had good results, and so it's going to be very interesting to see you know this first pick or this first series of picks, I guess, really by the Bloom regime, where they have had real input into it, and how they pan out, since these are the first guys that they're going to get their hands on, you know, from the word go, like right after they sign, and be able to help mold them. So uh, I think it's going to be very interesting, and you know, I'm usually like underwhelmed by the Cardinals draft. But this year, I feel like there's definite upside where like there's some potential there and loud tools that you can wish on, and it'll be very interesting to see how they evolve through the system.
Absolutely. It will be very interesting. And Ben and I will be back with you in 4 or 5 years to let you know how that worked out. So, because it takes a crazy, crazy long time to know how these things shake out. Ben, why don't we jump into some questions? First question we got comes from Guth Sports. And Guth Sports asks, why is Cardinals baseball this year always the first team to score 8 runs wins unless
Well, this
Sonny is
has
pitching?
been, I would say, a more recent development with the Fetty and Michaelis brutal regressions, and then Palante starts have been a little bit of an adventure. And we've hit this horse before, and I think it's dead. But when you pitch to contact, you are opening yourself up to balls in play, and sometimes balls in play find the outfield grass, and sometimes loud contact carries over the wall. And so the Palantes and Michaelis and Fetty type pitchers are more open, especially in an era where players are optimizing their home run swings because teams other than the Cardinals have pitchers with such disgusting stuff that it is much better for the team's competitive hopes and dreams to be able to hit the ball over the fence. And so when they are able to face a pitcher like Miles Michaelis or Eric Fetty or Andre Palante, sometimes it's going to be like an orca hitting a seal on a beach, and it gets pretty ugly pretty fast. And so I would say Liberator has also been good in addition to Sonny Gray. But the good news is that the Miles Michaelis era will be ending soon, and so will the Eric Fetty era. It's just a question of whether it's in season this year or after the last out of the year for the Cardinals. They're not going to be back, and so hopefully the new
Yep.
regime is able to fill that in with some more effective starters.
Agreed. And I feel like I'm like legally obligated here to remind folks that these pitchers are better than you think they are. Like, even though they're not fun to watch. If we wanted to use wins above replacement on the pitching side, none of their starters are at below replacement level. Eric Fetty is almost exactly at replacement level. He's the worst, but everybody else is contributing, positively. It's just not as positively as you'd like, and it's miserable to watch that contribution. But the other factor here, as you and I have talked about, is you can talk about like where you're at relative to the league, and you can talk about replacement level, but it's a different thing to talk about, well, who are the actual replacements that you have. And the Cardinals have absolutely nobody behind these guys. I mean, McGreevy is the one guy who is, ready to potentially be a major league pitcher. I think we will see him. I think he's got a good chance to be the new version of Michaelis and Fetty, and maybe slightly better, but not much better than that. And then behind him, you have nobody who's ready to start right now. So there was no alternative to them for using these guys. And frankly, they haven't been fun, they haven't been great, but they haven't been as bad as I think they often get a rap for
Um,
being.
yeah, but they're also, when it goes bad, it goes so ugly um, that I think that's
Yeah.
why people are ready to be done with them. And with Fetty, the interesting thing
Yep.
to me is there, there's kind of a person that fans are calling for, just periodically to be removed from the rotation. And it was Palante early. Although he has better stuff than Michaelis or Fetty. And Fetty should have been the guy all the way through. Like, he has pitched terribly. He just got lucky with his earned run average. And because we were all raised on ERA, it masks or it creates kind of a blind spot for us. I think sometimes on how poorly or well a pitcher is pitched. But Fetty has been terrible, and I think we're to the point where he needs to not be starting games. And I'm just genuinely interested in the dynamic that management has because, I think you need to put McGreevy in now. Like it's time. And I know that they don't have a sixth
Yeah.
starter in AAA if they do that, but is Ollie Marmol going to be able to like just
Right.
have a bullpen game? Because a bullpen game is going to be basically the same as Fetty in terms of what the first guy who pitches is going to give you
Yeah.
in terms of outs, right? Um, but it
Right.
seems like the organization and Marmol have really focused on innings from starters as that is what they need. And I wonder if that's a front office preference or if that's a Marmol preference or what the deal is there because I think we're near the point where it is time and it sounded like maybe they were going to do it but then they got up to the cliff and they didn't do it here before the All-Star break. So I'm just wondering if they're hoping they can dump him at the trade deadline or what. But it's kind of a weird dynamic right now because what would you even get for him? Like, why are you dragging this along? Like, what
Yeah.
other organization is going to make that move?
Yeah. Right. Yeah. Yeah, and you're I agree. It's time to make that move, and you're close enough at the trade deadline that regardless of overall if you're going to be categorized as a buyer or a seller, like you can backfill some
Yeah,
some
yeah.
starter innings if that's something that you need, and probably do not saying you're going to get anything great, but you can probably do better than Fetty.
Cole
So
Morris on Blue Sky asks, I was watching the game the other night, and Brad asked Chip who he thought would end the year with the most home runs on the Cardinals. I I I have to dispute this. Were they talking about baseball on a FanDuel Midwest broadcast? Uh, Chip Carey and Brad Thompson?
you're
Um,
you're such a hater, Ben. You're such a hater. Let's trust our
Look, man, I
questioner
sat
here.
through the discussion of what Riz means in using teenager slang just last week, and it was so horrible. To which Chip answered Wilson Contreras. My question is, do y'all think Chip is right, or do y'all think somebody else will end the year with more home runs than Contreras?
Um, Ben, I noticed last week Chip was using outs above average when he was talking about the quality of different defenders. Didn't say anything about errors or anything like that. So I'm just saying I think Chip's on our team. But specifically to this question, I have to agree with Chip here as well. I mean, if I had to pick somebody, I would 100% say Wilson Contreras. He had that weird kind of like
Yeah,
slow start to the season, which like I'm just going to completely conjecture and say I really think that he in his first season where he was not catching, I feel like he felt like he had to contribute so much with his bat because he didn't have that like catching value, that he was just like pressing and trying to do way too much. That's 100% my conjecture. I have no evidence for that, but no, I mean it's it is Wilson Contreras. In terms of isolated power, which is a good kind of mark
yeah,
of who's of home run hitting beyond just maybe the specific number you've put together. He's the highest among the players who have a large amount of playing time, behind only Ivan Herrera. And I think Ivan Herrera would be the other person who I think could be a kind of a possible option here. But he's just, in terms of playing time and injury and stuff, he's a little further behind. And just for context, Contreras, the in terms of team lead, currently we've got Contreras and Nootbaar tied with 12, and then you've got Burleson with 11, Arenado with 10, and kind of on down from there. I don't see a reason to pick anybody
no, I
other than
think from a
Contreras.
playing
Ben, what do you
time
think?
perspective, Contreras is your guy. He's also the established power hitter, and he's not catching anymore, so you would expect a little bit more power. Um, I wouldn't be surprised if Lars Nootbaar ends the season on another team. Um, and Arenado, his he's just deteriorating at the plate. And so he's a dead pull hitter. So that's what he's going for is the long ball to left. But I just like if you're asking me to pick him over Contreras, I'm not going to do that. And Burleson, he has gone on his hot streak, and I fully expect him to cool off. Like I'm not. We went through this last year. I'm not gonna choose him over Contreras when his swing choice is seems to be deteriorating a little bit too. Um, Seems like he's chasing a little bit more, and once he starts to do that, his numbers take a little bit of a downturn, and he hits less home runs when he's chasing stuff on the edges or out of the zone. And so, I think Contreras has the best plate approach for hitting home runs and the best physical tools for doing it. So, all this is to say, like he's the
Yeah.
guy. Chip Carey is correct.
Yeah. Absolutely. Absolutely. All right, moving on to some questions related to the trade deadline, which is coming up here very soon. Jay from the Cardinals Discord says, thoughts on grabbing a threatening righty bat at the deadline, or is there too much risk in blocking Herrera, Walker, Sajc,
I
etc.?
think there are going to be a
Ben, what do you
lot of
say?
teams competing for threatening bats, whether they're righty or lefty. The Cardinals have a ton of left-handed bats, so I think they should be looking to sell some of those. Um, and I think that might help solve the problem a little bit if they're able to, you know, open things up for more right-handed plate appearances on the team with the players listed in the question. I would be surprised if they added a right-handed power bat. But you know who's available, Ben? Tommy Tommy Pham. So
Who's that? I just typed Tommy Pham in my notes here, by the
that would not
way.
make me sad. I would be pretty happy about that. But like when you look at
Yeah.
run differential and you kind of look at the standings, I don't know if the Cardinals approach this like a team trying to make the postseason so much as a team trying to position itself to make the postseason in 2026. And so I understand why folks want the team to do that, but by that same token, I would be surprised if they make that type of a move uh, for a bat. I think they're much more likely to try to find a
Yeah.
pitcher who's under team control beyond the end of this year, if that's where they're going to spend the resources they have at the trade deadline to make an acquisition.
Well, Ben, I'm going to harken back to my kind of what have I learned about the Cardinals being the Cardinals. This team is middling across the board, so they're not going to acquire anybody and they're not going to sell anybody. There's no value there to go either way. So, if they could acquire a threatening righty bat, I think they absolutely would. And I honestly don't think blocking these names here are would be a question. I don't think that would be an issue for them, but they've got nothing to trade. They've got nothing worthwhile to trade. I mean, everybody's gonna say Helsley, and Helsley is probably the most, maybe the highest end thing they have. But literally, Ben, on my sheet right here, I have Helsley, and under that I wrote Tommy Pham because that's the kind of thing you're probably get in terms of a major league player. That's probably about what you're going to top out there at, and frankly, that just like last year, that is a move that would be beneficial to this team is to bring in, I think Tommy Pham, even a yet another year of decline Tommy Pham from last year, is still
Yeah.
better than your like Jose Fermin type
Yep.
options that you're plugging in there. So that's still a plus move. But just for context, I think that's all the better we're gonna get there. And frankly, when you go to the pitching side, it's the same value proposition. It's like they might be able to acquire like the
Yes.
Tommy Pham of
Yes.
pitching, should if such a thing exists. So whatever pitcher has been stabbed the most, they might be able to get that guy. But otherwise, yeah, I don't necessarily see them making a big
No,
move there.
it would very much surprise me. Along those lines, the wallet inspector uh, asks on Blue Sky, Cards need to shake up the position player side of the roster. It's too left-handed, and there are too many first base DH types. Yes, Burley has improved, but he went from Keystone Cops to just regular bad. Who do you think are the most likely trade candidates, and who would you deal if different?
Yeah, I mean, I guess if we're talking about like Cardinal trade candidates, and specifically about them maybe like clearing the deck a little bit here. I mean, I guess referring to my previous answer, I don't know that I see them trading any of these guys who we refer to as like log jammed, because I just don't see. I really don't think they have that much value. I don't think they have much value to other teams. You brought up Lars Nootbaar a moment ago, and I think that's probably the most interesting or likely move that they could make. Um, you and I love Lars Nootbaar, and for the first month of the season, we were
Yeah,
singing his praises because he was fully healthy and he was showing what he can do when he's fully healthy. And it's interesting. Now, he did just go on the disabled list, kind of. They did this sort of
yeah,
around the All Star break thing where it's, maximizing his rest. He hasn't had a lot of sorry, I said disabled list. It's
yes.
injured list. Again, sorry about that, everyone. He hasn't had time, he hasn't really had time on the injured list this year in the way that he has in previous seasons. But I would contend that injury is still the issue with him, because he's had like nagging injuries or just been tired, and his performance has dipped. So it's kind of the same thing. And I think just what this year unfortunately is solidifying is, even though he maybe hasn't had to go onto the injured list, that version of him that produces at that high level, I just don't see any reason to think you're ever going to get that for a significant chunk of the season. It's a little
Yeah.
bit like Tyler O'Neill, frankly. I mean, different players, but same kind of thing with Tyler O'Neill, right? Um, so now that said, he at least has that very high end version in him, right? So I think you could still potentially get like a little value there from other teams, more so than pretty much any of these others guys. Nobody wants Burleson. I don't even think like a Gorman probably has a ton of trade value now. I mean, I think there's still enough kind of like prospectness there that like maybe there's a little, but yeah, I just don't think so I'd probably say, Newbar is the most likely trade candidate who could potentially get you like a little something in return. But again, it's not going to be a lot. It's going to be, Tommy Pham. So,
I mean,
Ben,
I
what do you
think
think?
if you're going to look at clearing the decks and getting more right-handed, you look at how many years of team control is left on the players. And that's why Lars Nootbaar is a name that's up there. Um, and I think, frankly, Brendan Donovan is a name that should probably be uh, under consideration by the organization. They went to an arbitration hearing with him. How many players who they do that with hang around, and how many players, even if they reach an agreement, to buy out the rest of his arbitration years. I mean, they did that with Harrison Bader. They did that with Tommy Edman. Did those guys play out those contracts as a Cardinal? No, they did not. And so, I think Donovan, and I know there's been all this press about how he's one of the leaders and this, that, and the other. But, you also look at it, and this year has gone about as well as it can for Donovan. He's got like a 328 batting average on balls in play, and he's got a 125 weighted runs created plus. He's an all-star, but it's, you know, if you're looking to the future, he's in his late 20s.
B Wells on Spotify. I think this might be the first question we've had come in from Spotify, Ben. B Wells says, "I think we need a new word besides competitive for being on the wild card bubble. They're not competitive. They're barely relevant." Ben, what's your take on that?
Well, we've talked about this back when they uh, included a postseason expansion in the new collective bargaining agreement, and how what that has done is it has expanded the definition of what it means to be competitive, because there are more playoff spots. So, because there are more playoff spots, you don't have to be as good to earn a playoff berth. And, you see it, like the Texas Rangers, they won the World Series after being not great. The Arizona Diamondbacks made it to the World Series after being not good. Um, and that's kind of the model is we don't have to spend as much. We can be more middling. And I think you're seeing more of a grouping in the middle of the standings now. As a result of teams are shooting for like 85 wins instead of 90 because you don't have to win your division. And so I think if we're all aware of how things have been watered down, it used to be the postseason was the two teams with the best record playing in the World Series, and then it was, oh, we're going to have a league championship series, so it's the four best teams, and then the wild card was introduced, and you had eight, and now it's expanded further, and so what it means to be competitive is not what it meant to be competitive even 10 years ago, and certainly not, 30. And so I think they are relevant because they're in the wild card race. But I
Yeah.
think we also need to recognize that the postseason format also means that if you win 84 games or 85 games, right, and you make the postseason, you very well could beat a 100 win team in a 5 game divisional series because of the way
Yeah.
that baseball is. And so that's really what they're trying to do. They're trying to get their seat at the craps table of the postseason.
Yeah. 100%, Ben. And I kind of feel like that's baseball. Like that. This is how baseball is. The best teams win about 60% of their games. The worst teams, lose like 40%. Right? It's so close. The difference between good teams and bad teams. So it's not like football or something like that, where the great team will blow out the crappy team 99 times out of 100. It doesn't work that way. So rather than say a new word for this being on the wild card bubble, I mean, I think they are competitive, and I guess I'd encourage just kind of adjusting your thinking and frankly just being able to enjoy a team that's performing at this level, because this is a competitive team. Let's not forget, this team is on pace to win more games than the 2006 St. Louis Cardinals did, right? and, and and I feel like that team that season worked out pretty well. So I get it, and I think especially those of us who watch every day, I just think human nature, sometimes it's easier to focus on the negative, and that's again why people are like, Michaelis and Fetty are like the scourge of the earth, when it's like, well, they're like bad, but they're not like below major league level pitchers. That's like, there's a lot of guys that are that bad that are out there pitching, right? So yeah, so I'm with you, Ben. I kind of think this is how it is, and I just try to look to the positive of it and say, hey, they are still they're still in it. They're still they're still competing, and who every now and then we get a 2006 out of it.
And, another point of reference, and we may be biased, Ben, because, we came of age at a young age with the 80s Cardinals, but then, when you're really able to follow the team as a young fan, it was in the 90s. And a lot of those 90s era teams that were managed by like Joe Torre would have been in the playoff hunt if they performed at that level nowadays, right? Like
Yeah, yeah.
if the format, or we took the format back in time, right?
Right.
Like and so
They
like
would have at least been in it longer into the season than
yes, yeah,
they
right.
ultimately
Like
were.
they're
Yeah.
yeah, they would have been more interesting teams from a competitiveness standpoint or a
Yeah, because
postseason
those teams weren't like
eligibility.
finishing dead last every season, but it
Right.
was often like third or fourth, or yeah.
Right. Like it was they're just more of a mediocre team. They were mediocrities. And the reality is that mediocre teams can make the postseason now and they can play in the World Series. And that's a systemic thing that none of us have control over. And so the question is, as you said, Ben, how do you approach it as a fan? Do you look at them and you're like, this team isn't good? Uh,
Yeah.
and are they MV3 good? No, they aren't. But whoever
Yeah.
was like in the history of the
Yeah.
organization. Like
Yeah.
that 2000 to 2005 run, I think really spoiled us a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, I've been watching baseball for about 40 years at this point in time, right? And like, I don't want to only sit on like the 2 or 3 seasons in my lifetime that they were in the ballpark of MV3 good and say like those are the only good teams, right? I want to be able to kind of find more enjoyment outside of that. So all right. Well, hey, thanks everybody as always for the questions. Hope folks will stick with us. Keep sending them our way as we go into the second half of the season here. So Blue Sky is always a good way to reach us. The Cardinals Discord we check. It was great to have this question from Spotify. We are posting on YouTube now as well. So you can always leave a question or a comment there as well. But Ben, as we wrap this up, as we head into the, again, in air quotes, second half of the season, what are you going to be looking for?
I am going to be looking at Ivan Herrera, as a DH full time, and how he performs in that role. He had the really, really great start, and not to say that he has been bad since then. But since the injury, his numbers have not been as great, and so I'm kind of interested to see, like, is he dinged up? Like, what does it look like at the plate when he's not for him when he's not getting behind the plate on defense, and are his numbers gonna creep back up now that his the grind on his legs is a little bit less for the second half of the season?
Yeah, absolutely. It's funny. I feel like it was just a few weeks ago we were talking about like, you know, he may catch for just the rest of this season and maybe a little bit of this season, but we see a position change coming way off over there on the horizon. And I
Yeah,
feel like, well, here we are at the horizon, a little
yeah.
sooner than we
It was actually
expected.
Monday, right?
Yeah. Right. Um, Ben, I am going to mix things up a little bit. Rather than say something I'm going to be looking for, I'm going to tell you something that I'm not looking for, Ben, and that is strength of schedule. And I don't know what it is. I don't know if I just happen to be reading this, but I just feel like I have heard so much like strength of schedule talk lately.
Football
When it
brain,
comes to
man.
it
Football
is
brain.
it's definitely football brain, but I can't just point the finger at other people because back when we were writing at Viva Albertos and I had to write something once a week, and in particular in those first weeks of the season when there just wasn't necessarily a lot, there were several times that I wrote like a strength of schedule thing because I was like, hey, here's something I can knock
Yeah.
out in an hour or two, and like maybe this is like kind of relevant and interesting, but in doing that, Ben, I just further convince myself that strength of schedule is just not a thing in baseball. It is just not a thing. And I just can't tell people enough just to not pay any attention to it. Again, the best teams win like 60% of the time. The worst teams win like 40% of the time. You're looking at, if you look at strength of schedule over like the next month, right? Or the next couple months, it's like, oh man, the Cubs have 4 more games that they have a 60% chance of winning than we do, right? Like it's so minuscule. It's like it just doesn't move the needle at all, and it's
And it
just not really
also
worth considering.
it also does not take into consideration the starting pitcher matchups.
Yeah,
Like
yeah,
even bad teams have like okay, the Cubs play Pittsburgh more often down the stretch. Well, how many times are they going to face Paul Skeens? Like,
yeah, yeah.
like would you rather face Pittsburgh and with Paul Skeens starting than the San Francisco Giants with well, I was going to use Jordan Hicks because I had forgotten that they had traded him. But you know
Yeah,
what I'm saying, where it's like,
yeah,
or a team that's like more
yeah,
competitive but is throwing some jobber out there. Like,
yeah. Yeah, I mean, maybe you want to look at it. It's the last series of the season, right? And you're 1 game behind the team you're trying to overtake for the wild card, and you're playing the Dodgers and they're playing the Rockies, right? Okay,
right.
there's a point where I would say like strength of schedule is not in your favor, but if you go even just a couple weeks, certainly a month, and very certainly a half a season, it's just there's just not enough difference between teams. It's not meaningful. So So don't stress yourself out with it, because I feel like that's what people do too, is they stress themselves out, right? Because it's either like, oh man, this team we're trying to overtake has such an easy schedule, right? And so you're down, or you're like, oh man, we've got this easy schedule and they've got a tough schedule, and then when you both come through it like at 500, you feel like your team has like underperformed.
Yeah.
It's just not a real useful metric, I don't think. So I would encourage people, just don't pay attention to strength of schedule. All right. Well, Ben, we've reached the end. Any parting words before we let folks go and launch into the home stretch of the season?
Um, I would say that it would behoove us all, I think, to just kind of let it go a little bit, because I don't think that this roster and the way the team is playing this year lends itself to a clear direction to go, in terms of buying or selling, these traditional categories. And I think Mozeliak has reflected this reality in his comments, where they're listening, they're gonna yada 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 about. I think they're going to trade away players, and I think they're going to make some acquisitions as well. And I don't know that when the dust settles, we will be able to say that they are better positioned to make the postseason this year because of what they did. But I think they'll probably be better positioned in the years ahead than they otherwise would have been.
Very much agree with you, Ben. Very much agree with you. And looking ahead, the next off day is on the trade deadline. It's July 31st.
Perfect.
So, yeah, and we know that the Cardinals are not going to make any moves until the 11th hour anyway. So, hopefully, maybe they've made whatever move they're going to make just before we record. Otherwise, we can talk about what they might do in those final moments there. But regardless, we will be back with you on that next Cardinals off day. Thanks as always to Devant for the music, Dan for helping us out with social media. Remember, you can check us out on YouTube as well. And we'll be back with you on the trade deadline, which is the next Cardinals off day.